About 5 months ago, I covered the story of the 8 Passengers YouTube channel and all of the evils that were going on behind the scenes. 8 Passengers was a YouTube channel that had over 2 million subscribers. It was a popular family channel that showcased a strict style of parenting. That's what it became known for. But the word strict doesn't really cover it. That's a huge understatement. It was really alarming to a lot of viewers because they were treating their family like they were in the Marine Corps. They ruled their family with an iron fist. And it eventually came out that the children in these videos were being abused. And 5 months ago, the story broke. One of the children freed themselves, escaped the house, went over to the neighbors, who then contacted the authorities, and after an investigation, found some horrific shit was going on with this family. Mainly, the mother, Ruby Frank, abusing her children. Ruby Frank also had an accomplice named Jodi Hildebrandt, and together the two of them put these children through unspeakable evils. And today, I have an update to share with all of you because they have been sentenced. Ruby Frank was apparently sobbing at the sentencing and blamed the child abuse on being deceived into thinking the world was evil. I don't understand that thought process at all. She was deceived into thinking the world was an evil place, thus she had to be evil herself. You're the evil, Ruby. You are the one who knocks. The fuck you talking about? She had the gall to try and paint herself as a victim almost, making claims that she was manipulated and morally confused, and it ended up with her turning into this child abuser. It's ridiculous. But luckily the crocodile tears from this brain-dead strategy here didn't do much to help her. She was sentenced to 4 to 60 years in prison. She pled guilty along with her associate to abusing 2 of Frank's children. However, neither woman will serve more than 30 years in prison because of a Utah law that prohibits consecutive sentences exceeding that. Moments before a Utah District Court judge sentenced Frank to consecutively serve 1 to 15 years behind bars for each of the 4 counts of aggravated child abuse, Frank tearfully told the court she never meant to harm the children. Which makes absolutely no sense. She obviously knew what she was doing was harming the children because she would deprive them of food, water, a place to sleep, and the children were even beaten, among other horrible things. All things that can't necessarily be confused with just building character or something like that. Can't possibly be just written off as strict parenting. This isn't one of those situations where you'll see people come out of the woodwork to defend it. They were just spanking their kids. It helps discipline them. Put some hair on their chest. I remember when Peepaw took me out back and made me gargle a glass of motor oil and nails in order to turn into a man, and look how I turned out. It's nothing like that. She would beat her kids and left them in states of malnourishment. It's so heinous what Ruby and Jodi inflicted upon these children. And that Utah law that prohibits them from serving that full, potentially 60-year sentence really sucks here because they deserve life in jail for what they've done here. The reason why there's a huge range of 4 to 60 years is because there's still one more step where another board is going to ultimately decide how much time they should spend there. And if the board members are watching, it better be the maximum. Anything shy of the maximum is an affront to justice. Heavens to Betsy, I tell you, if they end up only serving 4 years for these actions, I'm gonna have a conniption. You would be enabling monsters to get away with it. And that is an unforgivable sin on your part. You would be condemning yourself to hell for that. You'd be dining down there with Lucifer in the afterlife if you let them get away with this and only get 4 years of prison time. So the Business Insider article dives a bit more into Frank's behavior during this. So she was saying that she was deceived and had a distorted version of reality that went largely unchecked. She then just starts blabbering to try and prove that she had a distorted view of reality, saying, "I was led to believe that this world was an evil place filled with cops who control, hospitals that injure, government agencies that brainwash, church leaders who lie and lust, husbands who refuse to protect, and children who need abuse." Let me pause real quick. Ruby, if this was your view of the world, why wouldn't you want to rise above that and be the exact opposite of that perspective? So you're viewing the world through your stupid glasses, whatever. You got your fucking moron dunce hat on, whatever. Why wouldn't you want to be the exception? Why wouldn't you want to be the one that's loving and nurturing their children? Why wouldn't you want to be the one that's not evil in this evil world you believe you live in? That doesn't make any sense. You are just yapping about fucking nothing. This is a nothing burger of a statement. It is once again just her trying to paint herself as almost some kind of victim of deceit. Now, I don't know if this next part is her just putting on a facade, faking self-awareness, or if she really does finally understand that she is the big bad here, and that it is all her fault, but she says that it was her choice to believe and behave this paranoia. It culminated in a criminal activity, and she stands ready to take accountability, and then says at the end, I can see now over the past 4 years I was in a deep undercurrent that led us to danger. I would never have led you to darkness knowingly. I was so disoriented that I believed dark was light and right was wrong. I would do anything in this world for you. To me, this feels like hollow words, because the only thing she ever did in the world for her children was keep them in a state of malnourishment, fear, and misery. I really get the impression that Ruby is a manipulator. I think what she's trying to do here is put on this act of remorse. I really get the impression, through learning what I have about this case now, that Ruby would do anything to keep herself out of trouble. But I think deep down she isn't really remorseful of her actions. I don't think she existed in this year-long disoriented state that led her to abusing her kids for this long period of time. She was so proud of the way that she handled her family, she would post about it frequently on YouTube and defend it as like a strict parenting style. So I really think she's not remorseful and just desperately trying to save her own ass. Also, the next thing she said about her willingness to sacrifice all for her children being masterfully manipulated into something very ugly, once again reads to me as her trying to pass the blame. Now, throughout a lot of this, it seems that Ruby is trying very hard to play like the deceived victim here, and Jodi kind of being like the puppet master behind it. Jodi was the one that was really kind of isolating Frank, keeping her away from her husband and all of these other things, and making sure that her morality was constantly confused. So it really just seems like Frank's strategy was to push a lot of that onto Jodi, where she was the Frankenstein who made Ruby into a monster. Allegedly, Ruby had been made to believe that Hildebrandt had insight to offer a path to continual improvement, and eventually it twisted into something heinous, which resulted in all of the abuse. Frank's lawyer even outright said that she was manipulated by Hildebrandt, saying that Hildebrandt systematically isolated her from extended family, older children, and her husband, and gave her a distorted sense of morality. Even though, like I said, Ruby Frank is a child abuser who I also believe to be a manipulator as well. So Jodi also is evil, let's not forget. So speaking of Jodi, she received the same prison sentence as Ruby. Jodi will be facing 4 to 60 years in prison as well. Again, that's up to the board to decide exactly how long, and I'm hoping they make the right decision and give her and Ruby the maximum amount of time in prison. Now, if you're unfamiliar with the 8 passengers abuse case, there's going to be a quick summary that I'll go through here. So in August, one of the children, the 12-year-old son, climbed through a window from Hildebrandt's house to get help for himself and his 10-year-old sister, which prompted a neighbor to call the police. And at the time, the police described the child as emaciated and injured with duct tape around his ankles and wrists. The prosecutor said Miss Frank and her business partner held 2 children ages 9 and 11 turning 12 in a concentration camp-like setting. The children were regularly denied food, water, beds to sleep in, and virtually all forms of entertainment. The children were beaten, bound, forced to do manual labor in the sweltering heat, and emotionally abused. Both children had extensive physical injuries from the abuse that required hospitalization when they were found, and the injuries from the bindings to the 12-year-old were particularly awful. There's more information about some of the abuse that she would inflict upon her children. She kicked her son, held his head underwater, covering his nose and mouth so he couldn't breathe. All kinds of horrible things that I don't think I need to keep going into detail on. You get the idea. Ruby and Jodi are monsters. Plain and simple. Now I want to briefly discuss the husband, Kevin. So, as you've just learned, Jodi had urged them to separate. She kept Ruby isolated from him. In order to save their marriage, Jodi suggested that they separate, so Kevin eventually moved out and stopped communicating with his family at Jodi's direction. Now, social workers and police were called to the family home multiple times in recent years, but there are no formal accusations. Kevin has made statements through his lawyer, Randy Kester, and has stated, the treatment these children received at the hands of those whom the children had a right to trust was horrific and inhumane, both physically and psychologically. Kevin remains focused on the rehabilitation of these sweet and vulnerable children so that they might return to a normal life as soon as possible. So it sounds like he had no idea what was happening there due to being separated from the family like that. When I initially covered this story, I didn't know that he was away from the rest of the family and completely ceased communication altogether, so I guess that would explain how he'd be in the dark. But if I'm being honest, I'm extremely surprised that he wouldn't see his children a single time throughout this long period of abuse. Like, if he saw them one time, he would immediately know what's going on, because the neighbor, the authorities, they were able to immediately see something was wrong. They were in a malnourished, emaciated state. There was, the bruises, like so much that you would immediately see and you can't be oblivious to. It would be impossible to be oblivious to. You can't ignore it. You would know. I'm not trying to accuse him of anything here. I'm just saying it is a little weird that he wouldn't see these children throughout this long period of the abuse they endured. I understand Jodi told them to separate and to stop talking, but I can't imagine someone just willingly doing that without checking in occasionally. Especially because they're still together. Those are still his children too. You know what I mean? But anyway, I am happy to see that Ruby and Jodi will be facing prison time for this. Hopefully, a lot of prison time for this, because it is heinous. What they've done is unforgivable. And I think even 30 years, if they get the maximum sentence, is a light sentence for this shit. This is awful stuff. So yeah, I just wanted to give you an update to this story. That's really about it. So yeah.